They pleaded for help. Humanity answered with total war. Part 1, The Plea. The signal came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Dr. Yoon Hana was drinking her third cup of coffee when her computer started beeping. She almost ignored it. The deep space array caught strange signals all the time. Most of them were just noise from distant stars. But this signal was different. It had a pattern. It repeated every 47 seconds, exactly the same each time. Hana put down her coffee and leaned closer to her screen. Her heart began to beat faster. After 30 years of searching, after countless false hopes, she was looking at something impossible. This was not random noise. This was a message. She called her team. They worked for 17 days without rest. They ate at their desks. They slept in shifts. Slowly, piece by piece, they decoded the signal. The message was simple. It was desperate. It broke Hana's heart. "We are dying, please. Anyone help us." Within hours, the message reached Admiral Park Jun-ho at United Earth Fleet Command. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and seen terrible things. He thought nothing could surprise him anymore. He was wrong. Jun-ho assembled a small fleet of 12 ships. He did not know what they would find. He did not know if this was a trap, but someone was asking for help, and he could not ignore that. The journey took 6 days. When they arrived at the signal's origin, Jun-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the viewscreen in silence. A beautiful blue planet floated in space. It was covered in oceans and green islands. It looked like Earth's younger sister, but something was very wrong. Giant warships hung in orbit above the planet. They were firing down at the surface. Jun-ho counted 40 of them. Each one was larger than anything humanity had ever built. Columns of fire rose from the planet below. Cities were burning. "Sir," his communications officer said, her voice shaking, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface." A face appeared on screen. It was not human. The creature had smooth blue skin, large dark eyes, and gills on the sides of its neck. It looked afraid. It looked exhausted. It looked like it had been crying for a very long time. "I am Elder Vora of the Lurin Council," the creature said. Are you real? Did someone actually come?" Jun-ho stepped forward. "I am Admiral Park Jun-ho of the United Earth Fleet. We received your message. Who is attacking you?" Vora closed its eyes. Tears ran down its blue cheeks. "Thank you," it whispered. "Thank you for coming. We have been calling for 3 years. No one answered. No one ever answers." The story Vora told was heartbreaking. The Lurin were a peaceful species. They had evolved on a world without predators. They had never needed to fight, so they never learned how. Instead, they created art. They wrote poetry. They developed medicine that could cure almost any disease. They were kind and gentle and completely defenseless. The attackers were called the Dreth Dominion. They were an empire that had existed for 4,000 years. They traveled from world to world, conquering and enslaving every species they found. They had destroyed 47 civilizations. The Lurin were simply next on their list. "Why?" Jun-ho asked. "What do they want?" "Everything," Vora said. "They take our resources. They take our people as slaves. They take our world. And when they are finished, they will move on to the next planet and do the same thing again. They have been doing this for thousands of years. No one has ever stopped them." Jun-ho watched the Dreth ships continue their bombardment. He thought about his own children back on Earth. He thought about all the Lurin children dying on the planet below. "How many of your people are left?" he asked. "Perhaps 2 million, out of 8 billion. They have been killing us for 3 years. Jun-ho made a decision. He opened a communication channel to Earth. He sent everything, the message, the video of the attack, Vora's story. Then he waited. The response came faster than he expected. The United Earth Council had watched the footage. They had seen Dreth soldiers dragging Lurin families from their homes. They had seen mass graves filled with bodies. They had seen children executed in the streets. The vote was unanimous. Earth would fight. But Admiral Junho knew that this would not be a small fight. The Dreth Dominion had conquered 200 worlds. They had thousands of warships. They had been waging war for 4,000 years. Humanity had never faced anything like this. But humanity had also never backed down from a fight. Not once in their entire history. Junho stood on his bridge and watched the Dreth ships. They had not noticed the human fleet yet. They were too busy killing defenseless civilians. They thought they were safe. They thought no one would challenge them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Junho opened a channel to all his ships. His voice was calm and cold. "Listen carefully," he said. "What we are about to do will change everything. We are not going to help the Lurin. We are not going to protect them and then go home. We are going to end this threat forever. The Dreth have spent 4,000 years destroying innocent worlds. That ends now. That ends with us." He paused and looked at the faces of his crew. They were afraid. They were angry. They were ready. "Prepare for total war," Junho said. "We will not stop until every slave is free. We will not stop until every Dreth warship is burning. We will not stop until the Dominion is nothing but ash and memory. This is not a rescue mission. This is the beginning of the end for every empire that thinks it can prey on the weak." The human ships moved into formation. Their weapons powered up. On the planet below, Elder Vora watched the small fleet advance toward the massive Dreth armada. "What are they doing?" one of the Lurin asked. "They are so few, they will be destroyed." Vora watched the human ships fly directly toward the enemy. They did not hesitate. They did not slow down. They attacked. "I do not know what humans are," Vora said quietly, "but I think the Dreth are about to find out." The first human missiles struck the Dreth flagship. The war for the galaxy had begun. They pleaded for help. Humanity answered with total war. Part 2, The First Strike. 6 months had passed since the battle at the Lurin homeworld. Admiral Junho had saved 2 million Lurin that day, but he had also lost 4 ships and 300 good soldiers. The Dreth had retreated, surprised and confused. They did not understand what had happened. But Junho understood. This was only the beginning. Back on Earth, the factories never stopped. Day and night they built ships. They built weapons. They built armor and tanks and missiles. Workers who had never held a gun volunteered to fight. Scientists who had studied stars now studied how to destroy enemy shields. In 6 months, the United Earth Fleet grew from 200 ships to 2,000. It was the fastest military buildup in human history. Every colony contributed. Every nation united. For the first time ever, humanity had a common enemy. Captain Lee Sujin stood on the bridge of her battleship, the Iron Will. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that could freeze water. She had joined the Navy at 18. Now, at 42, she was one of the best commanders in the fleet. "Captain," her navigator said, "we are ready to jump." Sujin nodded. Today was the day. Today, humanity would do something no species had ever done. They would attack the Dreth in their own territory. The plan was Admiral Junho's idea. Every other species had tried to defend themselves. They built walls, they hid. They hoped the Dreth would go away, and every time they lost. Junho refused to play that game. If the Dreth liked war so much, he would bring the war to them. The target was the Veth system, a major Dreth military base. Intelligence said there were 300 enemy ships there. The human fleet had 500. For the first time, they would have the advantage. The fleet jumped, space twisted around them, then suddenly they were there. Captain Sujin looked at the viewscreen and smiled. The Dreth base was exactly where the intelligence said it would be. Hundreds of enemy ships floated near a massive space station. Most of them had their weapons powered down. They were not expecting visitors. "All ships," Admiral Junho's voice came through the speakers, "attack." The human fleet surged forward. Missiles flew through space like angry fireflies. The Dreth tried to respond, but they were too slow. Their ships were still powering up when the first wave hit them. Captain Sujin guided the Iron Will through the chaos. Her gunners fired without stopping. Enemy ships exploded one after another. The Dreth formation fell apart. "They are running," her first officer said, surprised. "They are actually running." It was true. The Dreth were retreating, not in an organized way but in panic. Their ships flew in all directions, trying to escape. In 4,000 years they had always been the hunters. They did not know how to be the hunted. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it was over, 340 Dreth warships were destroyed. The human fleet had lost only 23. The Veth system belonged to humanity. Far away on the Dreth homeworld, High Tyrant Gore received the news. He was a massive creature, twice the size of a human, with thick gray skin and 4 arms. He had ruled the Dominion for 200 years. He had conquered 60 worlds himself. He had never lost a battle. "Explain this to me," he said to his advisor. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with anger. "Explain how a species we have never heard of destroyed 300 of my ships." The advisor trembled. "My lord, we do not know much about them. They call themselves humans. They come from a small planet on the edge of the galaxy. They have only existed as a space-faring species for 400 years. 400 years, Gore repeated. "We have been conquering worlds for 4,000 years. How did they defeat us?" "Their tactics are unusual, my lord. They do not fight like other species. They do not defend, they attack, constantly, without rest, without fear." Gore stood up from his throne. He walked to the window and looked out at his capital city. Billions of Dreth lived there and billions of slaves served them. This was his empire, his legacy. He would not let some primitive species threaten it. "Send a counterfleet," he ordered. 800 ships. Find these humans and destroy them. I want their homeworld burned and their species extinct within 1 year. The counterfleet assembled quickly. 800 of the best Dreth warships, commanded by Gore's most experienced admiral. They jumped to the Veth system, expecting to find a weak enemy licking its wounds. Instead, they found humanity waiting for them. Colonel Kim Tae-hyun was a ground forces commander, but today he was watching from an orbital station that human soldiers had captured. He was a quiet man with a scar across his left cheek. He had fought in the Mars uprising 20 years ago. He knew what war looked like. This was about to look very bad for the Dreth. The human fleet had not left the Veth system. Instead, they had set a trap. Mines floated in space, invisible until it was too late. Weapons platforms hid behind asteroids. The human ships waited in perfect formation. The Dreth fleet jumped in and immediately flew into the minefield. Explosions lit up space. Ships broke apart. Before the Dreth could recover, the human fleet attacked. Dr. Yoon Hana watched from a research vessel behind the main fleet. She had spent the last 6 months developing new weapons. Her masterpiece was called the Kinetic Rod, a simple metal bar that was launched at incredible speed. It had no explosives. It did not need them. At that speed, it could punch through any shield, any armor, any ship. Today was the first real test. She watched as the kinetic rods launched from human ships. They crossed the distance in seconds. When they hit the Dreth ships, they went straight through, leaving massive holes. "It works," Hana whispered. "It actually works." The battle was a massacre. The Dreth tried to fight, but they were outmatched. Their shields were useless against the kinetic rods. Their tactics were too slow. Their commanders did not know how to adapt. In 12 hours, 788 Dreth ships were destroyed. Only 12 escaped. The counterfleet was gone. Admiral Junho surveyed the battlefield. Wreckage floated everywhere. The war had only begun, but humanity had already sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. "We are not prey. We are not victims. We are the storm that comes for those who hurt the innocent." On the Dreth homeworld, Gore watched the battle footage in complete silence. His advisors stood behind him, too afraid to speak. Finally, one of them found his courage. "My lord," he whispered, "what are these creatures?" Gore did not answer. For the first time in 200 years, he did not have an answer. He had conquered 60 worlds. He had crushed species far older than humanity. But he had never seen anything fight like this. The humans did not fight to survive. They fought to win. There was a difference, and Gore was beginning to understand what it meant. The war was just beginning, and for the first time in 4,000 years, the Dreth Dominion was afraid. They pleaded for help. Humanity answered with total war. Part 3. The Nature of Humanity. The news of humanity's victories spread across the galaxy like fire. On slave worlds, whispers passed from one prisoner to another. On conquered planets, beings who had given up hope began to hope again. Someone was fighting back. Someone was winning. Colonel Kim Tae-hyun led his ground forces from world to world. Each planet they reached told the same terrible story. The Dreth did not just conquer. They destroyed everything good and left only pain behind. On the planet Keth, Tae-hyun's soldiers found their first slave camp. It was built in a valley between two mountains. High walls surrounded it. Guard towers stood at every corner. Inside, thousands of aliens from different species lived in conditions worse than animals. When the human soldiers broke through the gates, the slaves did not run toward them. They ran away. They hid in corners and covered their faces. They had been beaten so many times that they expected only more pain. Sergeant Choi Min-yu was the first soldier to enter the camp. He was an ordinary man from a small town on Earth. He had joined the army because he wanted to see the stars. He never imagined he would see something like this. A small creature crouched near the wall. It had green skin and large eyes filled with terror. Min-yu knelt down slowly. He removed his helmet so the creature could see his face. "It is okay," he said softly. "We are not going to hurt you. We are here to help." The creature stared at him. "Help," it said, as if it did not understand the word. "Yes, help, you are free now." The creature started to cry. It was the first kindness it had experienced in 30 years. Min-yu spent the next 3 hours carrying survivors to the medical ships. His arms ached, his legs burned, but he did not stop. None of the soldiers stopped. One of the survivors was a child. Min-yu did not know what species it was. It had pale skin and no eyes, only smooth flesh where eyes should be. It was dying. The doctors said there was nothing they could do. Min-yu sat with the child anyway. He held its small hand and talked to it. He told it about Earth, about blue skies and green forests and oceans that went on forever. The child could not see these things, but it listened. "Are you angels?" the child asked. Min-yu felt tears running down his face. "No," he said, "we are human, and we are here to help." The child smiled, then it was gone. Min-yu buried the child himself. He planted a small flag from Earth over the grave. When he returned to his squad, no one asked him about the tears on his face. They all had their own tears. As the human fleet advanced deeper into Dreth territory, something unexpected happened. The liberated species began to join them. Not as soldiers, most of them had no idea how to fight, but they provided food, fuel, medicine, and information. A being from a world called Thessa knew the locations of every Dreth fuel depot in 3 star systems. A scientist from the planet Orn helped Dr. Hana improve the kinetic rod design. An old leader from a nearly extinct species drew maps of Dreth patrol routes from memory. For the first time, the galaxy was working together, not because someone forced them, but because they chose to. Humanity had shown them that the Dreth could be beaten. Now they wanted to help finish the job. Admiral Junho called a meeting of all senior officers. The war was going well, but he knew the hardest part was still ahead. The Dreth had thousands more ships. Their homeworld had never been attacked, and High Tyrant Gore was not stupid. He was learning from his losses. "We cannot fight a long war," Junho said. "The Dominion is too big. If we slow down, they will rebuild faster than we can destroy them. We need to keep attacking. We need to give them no time to think, no time to plan, no time to breathe." Captain Sujin nodded. "Total war." "Total war," Junho confirmed. "Every military base, every shipyard, every weapons factory. We burn it all. We do not stop until there is nothing left." Dr. Yoon Hana stood in the corner of the room. She had been quiet during the meeting, but now she stepped forward. "I have something to show you," she said. She led them to a secure laboratory deep inside the flagship. In the center of the room sat a small device, no bigger than a basketball. It glowed with a soft blue light. "I call it the Prometheus device," Hana said. "It can destabilize a star, create massive solar flares, destroy entire star systems." The room went silent. Everyone stared at the device. "Why did you build this?" Junho asked. "Because the Dreth have something similar. They used it once, 2,000 years ago, to destroy a species that was winning against them. I built this so we would have an answer if they tried again." Junho looked at the device for a long time. Then he locked it away. "This is a last resort," he said. "We will not use it unless we have no other choice. We are fighting to save lives, not to become monsters ourselves." Hana nodded. She understood, but she also knew that war had a way of forcing hard choices. That night, Captain Sujin found Kel standing alone on an observation deck. Kel was a young Lurin who had survived the attack on his homeworld. He had been helping the humans ever since, providing information about Dreth tactics and technology. He was staring at the stars. The human fleet stretched out before him, thousands of lights in the darkness. "What are you thinking about?" Sujin asked. Kel did not look at her. "My people spent 1,000 years wondering if we were alone in the universe. We sent messages to the stars. We hoped to find friends. We dreamed of meeting other beings who loved art and beauty and peace." He turned to face her. His large, dark eyes reflected the light of the distant stars. "We never imagined this," he said. "Imagined what?" "Protectors," Kel gestured at the fleet. "You did not know us. You had never heard of us. But when we called for help, you came. And you did not just come to save us. You came to make sure no one else would ever suffer like we did." Sujin did not know what to say. She had never thought of it that way. To her, this was simply what had to be done. The Dreth were hurting innocent people. Someone had to stop them. "That is what humans do," she said finally. "When someone needs help, we help." Kel shook his head slowly. "That is not what most species do. Most species only care about themselves. They hide. They hope the danger will pass them by. But humans," he paused, "humans run toward the fire." Sujin smiled. "We have always been a little crazy." "Maybe," Kel said. "Or maybe you are exactly what the galaxy needed." Behind them, the fleet prepared for its next jump. More worlds to liberate, more battles to fight, more people to save. The war was far from over. But for the first time in 4,000 years, the galaxy had hope. They pleaded for help. Humanity answered with total war. Part 4, The Dark Hour. 2 years had passed since humanity first heard the Lurans cry for help. In that time, the United Earth Fleet had liberated 89 worlds. They had destroyed half of the Dreth military. They had freed millions of slaves. But the war was not over. High Tyrant Gore had spent those 2 years watching, learning, planning, and now he was ready to strike back. Admiral Junho received intelligence about a weapons depot in the Nexus system. The report said the depot contained new Dreth superweapons that could turn the tide of the war. Destroying it would cripple the Dominion for years. It was exactly what Junho needed. It was also exactly what Gore wanted him to think. The human fleet jumped to the Nexus system with 1,500 ships. When they arrived, Junho immediately knew something was wrong. The weapons depot was there, but it was surrounded by more ships than he had ever seen in one place. 3,000 Dreth warships, the entire remaining fleet of the Dominion. "It is a trap," Captain Sujin said, her voice tight. "I know," Junho replied. There was no point in running. The Dreth had positioned their ships to block every escape route. All ships prepare for battle. The Battle of Nexus began with the Dreth attacking from all sides. Human ships exploded in the first minutes. The fleet tried to form a defensive formation, but there were too many enemies. Captain Sujin commanded the Iron Will from the front lines. Her ship took hit after hit. Fires broke out on 3 decks. The shields failed twice, but she kept fighting. "Status report," she demanded. "We have lost the forward weapons array. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. We are down to 40% combat effectiveness." Sujin gritted her teeth. Around her, human ships were dying. She could see them on her screen, little lights blinking out one by one. On the moon below, Colonel Tihyun's ground forces were trapped. They had landed to secure an observation post before the trap closed. Now they were surrounded by Dreth soldiers with no way to escape. "We need evacuation," Tihyun radioed to the fleet. "We have 2,000 soldiers down here and the enemy is closing in." But there were no ships to send. Every transport was either destroyed or fighting for its life. Admiral Junho watched the battle falling apart. He had never lost before. He had always found a way to win, but today there was no way out. "Sir," his communications officer said, "the Iron Will is requesting permission to advance." Junho looked at his screen. The Iron Will was badly damaged. It should be retreating, not advancing. "Captain Sujin, what are you doing?" Sujin's face appeared on his screen. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. Smoke filled the bridge behind her. "I am going to open a hole in their formation. Get the fleet out while you can." "That is suicide." "I know," Sujin's voice was calm, "but someone has to do it, and my ship is already dying. Better to make the death mean something." Junho wanted to argue. He wanted to order her to stop, but he knew she was right. If the Iron Will could break through, even for a few minutes, part of the fleet might escape. "Captain Lee Sujin," he said formally, "it has been an honor serving with you." "The honor was mine, sir." Sujin turned to her crew. "Everyone evacuate. That is an order. I will pilot the ship myself." Her crew refused to leave. Every single one of them stayed at their posts. They knew they were going to die. They did it anyway. The Iron Will accelerated toward the Dreth command ship. Enemy weapons fire hammered its hull. Entire sections of the ship broke away, but it kept going. Sujin opened a channel to the fleet. "Tell my daughter I love her," she said, "and tell Junho finish this." The Iron Will crashed into the Dreth command ship at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. The explosion tore a hole in the Dreth formation. Junho seized the moment. "All ships retreat through the gap, now." The human fleet fled through the opening Sujin had created. Behind them, the Dreth regrouped and gave chase, but the humans had enough of a head start to escape. When the counting was done, humanity had lost 800 ships and 200,000 soldiers. Colonel Tihyun managed to evacuate his ground forces at the last moment, but just barely. It was the darkest day in human history. On the Dreth homeworld, High Tyrant Gore smiled for the first time in 2 years. He had crushed the humans. He had shown them that the Dominion was not so easily defeated. But he wanted more. He wanted complete victory. Gore broadcast a message to Earth. His massive gray face filled screens across the human worlds. "Humans," he said, "you have been brave, foolish but brave. I respect courage, so I will give you a choice. Surrender now and I will allow your species to live as slaves. Refuse and I will destroy your colonies one by one. Your children will watch your worlds burn. Your species will become dust and memory. You have 30 days to decide." The message ended. Across human space, people gathered in the streets. They had heard about the Battle of Nexus. They knew about the losses. They had seen the footage of ships exploding, of soldiers dying, of Captain Sujin's final moments. Many species would have surrendered. After a defeat like that, most would have accepted any terms to stop the pain. But humans were not most species. On Earth, in cities around the world, people did not panic. They did not cry or beg for peace. They stood in silent groups and looked up at the sky. Admiral Junho returned to Earth to address the planet. He stood in the great plaza of the United Council, surrounded by millions of people. His uniform was torn. His face showed exhaustion and grief, but his voice was strong. "Today we lost many good people," he said. "Captain Lee Sujin, 200,000 soldiers, 800 ships. The Dreth think they have broken us. They think that if they hurt us enough, we will give up." He paused and looked at the crowd. Millions of faces looked back at him. "They do not understand what we are. We are humans. Our history is written in struggle. Our greatest achievements came from our darkest moments. When we are knocked down, we do not stay down. We get back up and we fight harder." A sound began in the crowd. It started quiet, then grew louder. It was not cheering, it was not crying. It was a low, steady chant. One word repeated over and over. More, more, more. More ships, more soldiers, more weapons, more war. Junho felt something change in the air. The despair was gone. In its place was something harder, something colder, something that had kept humanity alive through ice ages and plagues and world wars. Determination. "The Dreth gave us 30 days, Junho said. "In 30 days we will show them what humanity is capable of. In 30 days we will end this war. Not with surrender, not with treaties. We will end it with victory." The crowd erupted. The sound reached the sky. In the burned wreckage of the Iron Will, rescue teams found a single recording device. It had survived the explosion. On it was Captain Sujin's final message to her daughter. "I know you are angry. I know you wanted me to come home, but some things are bigger than us. Some fights have to be fought even when the cost is everything." The Lurin called for help and no one came for 3 years. 3 years of watching their children die. I could not let that continue. I could not look away. Be angry at me if you need to, but please be proud too. I died fighting for something good. That is all anyone can ask for. The recording ended. Somewhere on Earth, a young woman listened to it and cried. Then she dried her tears and walked to the nearest recruitment office. The war was not over. The hardest battle was still to come. But humanity was ready. They pleaded for help. Humanity answered with total war. Part 5, Total War. The 30 days passed quickly. Every human colony worked without rest. Factories that had been building consumer goods now built weapons. Schools became training centers. Hospitals prepared for the wounded that everyone knew would come. But something else happened too. Ships began arriving from across the galaxy. Not human ships, ships from the liberated worlds. The Lurin sent medical vessels crewed by their best doctors. The people of Thessa sent cargo ships filled with fuel and supplies. Even species that had been nearly destroyed by the Dreth sent what little they had. A single shuttle here, a handful of volunteers there. None of them could fight, but they could support those who did. Admiral Junho stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Defiant. Around him, the largest fleet in galactic history assembled. 4,000 warships, 2 million soldiers, every weapon humanity could build. And at the center of it all, locked in the deepest vault of the flagship, sat the Prometheus device. Junho hoped he would never need it, but he had learned the hard way that hope was not a strategy. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "all ships report ready." Junho nodded. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "Today we finish what we started 2 years ago. The Dreth have ruled this galaxy through fear for 4,000 years. They have destroyed innocent worlds. They have enslaved billions. They have told themselves that they are the strongest, that no one can stop them. He paused and looked at the stars. Today we prove them wrong. Today we take the war to their homeworld. Today we show the galaxy that no empire built on cruelty can last forever. For the Lurin, for every species the Dreth have destroyed, for everyone who ever called for help and received only silence. He took a deep breath. All ships jump. The fleet vanished into faster-than-light travel. When they emerged, they were in the heart of the Dreth Dominion. The Dreth homeworld hung before them, a massive gray planet circled by hundreds of space stations and defensive platforms. And waiting for them was High Tyrant Gor's remaining fleet, 2,000 ships, the last military power of the Dominion. Gor watched the human fleet arrive from his palace on the surface. He had expected them to come. He had hoped they would surrender, but he had prepared for this. "Destroy them," he ordered. "Every ship, every soldier, leave nothing alive." The battle began. Human ships crashed against Dreth lines like waves against rocks. Explosions filled the space around the planet. Colonel Tihiun led the ground assault, dropping through the atmosphere in assault pods while the fleet provided cover. The fighting in orbit was brutal. Ships on both sides died by the dozens. But humanity had learned from the Battle of Nexus. They did not cluster together. They spread out, attacked from multiple angles, gave the Dreth too many targets to focus on. Dr. Yoon Hana watched from a science vessel behind the main fleet. Her kinetic rods tore through Dreth ships. Her shield-breaking missiles cleared paths for the human fighters. Every weapon she had created was being used today. "We are winning," her assistant said, surprised. "We are supposed to win," Hana replied. "We have spent 2 years preparing for this moment." On the surface, the ground war was even more vicious. Colonel Tihiun's soldiers fought through the streets of the capital city. The Dreth defenders were strong and well-armed, but they were also desperate. They knew this was their last chance. Sergeant Choi Minyu led his squad through the chaos. He had survived the Battle of Nexus. He had buried too many friends to count, but he was still fighting. "The palace is ahead," he told his squad. "That is where Gor is hiding. If we take him, the war is over." They pushed forward. Dreth soldiers blocked every street. Minyu's squad fought through them one by one. They lost soldiers with each block they advanced. When they reached the palace gates, only Minyu and 3 others remained. "We need to get these gates open," Minyu said. "The main force is right behind us." The gates were massive, designed to withstand any assault, but Minyu noticed a control panel on a tower above them. If someone could reach it, they could open the gates from the inside. "Cover me," he said. He ran. Dreth soldiers fired at him from every direction. Bullets hit his armor, his arms, his legs. Pain exploded through his body, but he kept running. He reached the tower. He climbed. His hands left blood on every rung of the ladder. Below him, his squad was overwhelmed. He heard them die, one after another. At the top, Minyu found the control panel. His vision was fading. His hands were shaking, but he entered the command sequence. The gates opened. Minyu collapsed. The last thing he saw was human soldiers pouring through the gates he had opened. Then everything went dark. Colonel Tihiun led the charge into the palace. His soldiers swept through room after room, defeating Gor's elite guards. Finally, they reached the throne room. High Tyrant Gor stood alone. He was massive, twice the size of any human, with 4 arms and armor that had turned away 1,000 blades. But he did not fight. He simply stood and waited. "So," he said, "you have come to kill me." Tihiun raised his weapon. "No, you are going to answer for your crimes, for the 47 species you destroyed, for the billions you enslaved, for every child who died begging for mercy." Gor laughed. "Crimes. I built an empire that lasted 4,000 years. I brought order to the galaxy. The weak species we conquered would have destroyed themselves without us." "Is that what you tell yourself?" It is the truth, the strong rule, the weak serve. That is the way of the universe. Tihyun shook his head. You are wrong. The strong protect. The powerful serve those who cannot protect themselves. That is what separates civilization from tyranny. He lowered his weapon. I am not going to kill you. You are going to stand trial. Every species you ever hurt will have a voice, and then the galaxy will decide your fate. Gore stared at him with something like confusion. Why? Why did you do all of this? The Lurin were nothing to you. You had never met them. You had nothing to gain from helping them. Why did you risk everything for strangers? Tihyun thought about Sergeant Minyu, dying on a tower so that the gates would open. He thought about Captain Sujin, flying into certain death to save her fleet. He thought about the millions of humans who had volunteered to fight a war for people they had never met. Because they asked for help, he said simply. That is what humans do. The war ended that day. Dreth forces across 200 worlds surrendered when they learned Gore had been captured. The dominion that had ruled through terror for 4,000 years collapsed in a single afternoon. Humanity did not occupy the Dreth worlds. They did not build an empire of their own. Instead, they helped establish a galactic council where every species had an equal voice. The Lurin, the people of Thessa, the survivors of dozens of nearly destroyed civilizations, even the Dreth themselves once their military leaders were removed. Admiral Junho was offered leadership of the new council. He declined. We did not fight to rule, he said. We fought to protect. The galaxy belongs to everyone who lives in it. Years later, on the rebuilt Lurin homeworld, a monument was unveiled. It showed a human soldier carrying a wounded alien child. The soldier's face was tired but determined. The child was reaching up toward the stars. Elder Vora, old now but still alive, spoke at the ceremony. We sent our plea into the darkness, he said. We called for help for 3 years and no one answered. We thought we were alone. We thought no one cared. Then humans came. He looked at the monument. They were not what we expected. They were not peaceful. They were not gentle. They were warriors, fierce and unrelenting. But they used their strength to protect the weak. They used their power to free the enslaved. They looked at a galaxy full of suffering and said, "This is wrong and we will make it right." Vora turned to the crowd. Thousands of beings from hundreds of species had gathered. We asked for help. Humanity answered with total war. Not war for conquest, not war for profit, war for justice, war for the forgotten, war for everyone who ever cried out in the darkness and received only silence. He raised his hand toward the stars. And when the next call comes, and it will come, for the universe is vast and danger never truly ends, humanity will answer again, as they always do, because that is what humans are. In the crowd, a young woman stood beside a Lurin ambassador. She was Captain Sujin's daughter, now a naval officer herself. Beside her stood Kel, the young Lurin survivor who had helped humanity throughout the war. Together they watched the stars. Somewhere out there, on worlds humanity had not yet visited, other species faced other dangers. Other voices called out for help. And when those calls came, humanity would answer. As they always did. As they always would.